Those without the face that everyone wants. Very spirited young man. From his test scores, I'm sure he'll turn out to be one of my best students.
Well, I was visiting my dad. I was out here from London. I was 10 years old, and he was doing another film with Peter Sellers called The Party. And I was on the set, and I guess somebody saw me and asked who I was. And my dad's publicity person um, talked to this man. I guess it was a talent scout. I never really knew exactly who it was, but my dad's publicist came to him and said, you know, they're remaking Heidi, the movie Heidi, with Delbert Mann as the director. And Delbert Mann had just won an Academy Award for a movie called Marty. So he was very hot and at the time. And they're looking for a girl to play Heidi. And somebody saw Jennifer and wondered if she would, you know, maybe want to meet Delbert Mann. And I'd never acted before. I'd never even done a school play or anything. So anyway, my dad came to me and said, would you want to meet this director? And I said, okay. I mean, I knew the story of Heidi. I'd read the book and I loved the book. So I did. I met with Delbert Mann, and I later found out that they'd auditioned something like 1,000 girls from all over.
Wow.
And so he asked if I would screen test. And I don't think my parents ever thought that it was going to happen. So they said, sure, go, you know, screen test. So I did. And within a few days, I heard that I had gotten the role of Heidi. So I was on a plane in a couple of weeks heading to Switzerland to play the lead in a movie with Sir Michael Redgrave and Maximilian Schell and, you know, all these incredible actors. It got a lot of publicity. I mean, it was huge, the amount of, well, I can't even, the media stuff before it aired.
Yeah.
You know, I was on the cover of, in those days, the TV Guide, and there were commercials and all of this, watch Heidi, 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 Heidi. Now, I was back in London at the time when it was supposed to air on NBC here in the States. So I didn't really know what had happened until the next day. But NBC was told to put Heidi on exactly at 7 p.m., no matter what. And it just happened that NBC was also showing a major playoff football game between the New York Jets and the Oakland Raiders. It was going to determine who was going to go and do the other playoff before the Super Bowl. It was, you know, football here is like football there. I mean, it
would be like the quarterfinals of the World Cup and England versus Germany.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just, yeah. So every, you know, man basically in the United States is watching this game. And the New York Jets are up, you know, like 13 points or something. And I never remember the whole thing, but the Jets are winning, basically. Joe Namath, quarterback, famous, you know, all that. But they were they were on overtime, I think. And at 7 o'clock, they cut the game off and put Heidi on. And in 90 seconds, the Raiders came back and scored 2 touchdowns and won the game, and nobody saw it. So it literally it's still referred to as the Heidi game or the Heidi Bowl. It caused so much problems that supposedly, I mean, I know this for a fact, NBC the phones, they had a switchboard back then. It was 1968. They had a switchboard. It blew up. It literally
Oh,
caught fire because so many people were calling in and saying, what the heck happened? And, people were shooting guns in New York. The mayor was somebody, I mean, it was really, really, people were furious. And it changed television. I mean, no, they no longer will stop a game or preempt a game for something else. If basketball, football, doesn't matter. If they go into overtime, they stay on that.
they push the schedule.
Yeah. So that
That's
was my introduction into. Yeah, I mean, there's literally a Trivial Pursuit question. Why does the NFL hate Jennifer Edwards? And the answer is because she played Heidi. So it's my little dark cloud.
yeah, it's quite a heavy load to hold on your shoulders. But what was the experience like on set with these? I mean, did you find yourself a little starstruck, or was it just like a family after a short time?
I think because I grew up the way that I grew up, I was always around movie stars. I mean, they were always in my house, and so I don't think I've ever been starstruck per se. It just sort of was normal. So no, and I was always comfortable on a set. I knew what the words were. I knew what action meant. I knew what cut meant. I knew what print meant. I knew all of that because I'd witnessed it. So I was already kind of prepared, if you will. And and everybody was very, very careful with me, I think, as well, because they knew it was my first film. And so Jean Simmons, who played the nanny, she was very, very loving. She had her own daughters that weren't there on location with her or her husband. And my real mom was coming and going. So I had a nanny. So I wasn't with any family. So she kind of took me under her wing. We stayed in a hotel at one point, and our rooms were, we shared a wall, and she would knock on the wall before bed and I would knock back. And that was our way of kind of saying, I love you, good night, and whatever. And Sir Michael was, he was very loving and everything, but he was very, he when he was grandfather, he was grandfather. He didn't break character often. When the beard was glued on, he wasn't Sir Michael anymore at all. I mean, even at lunch, he was very much in his, old school actor, Shakespeare. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So again, a really interesting start. As I said before, you've lived many lives. So interestingly, I mean, Hollywood has been in the spotlight for not necessarily the greatest of reasons of the past few years, with Weinstein and Epstein. Growing up from the Hollywood system and through the years as you've seen it develop as a woman, how has your experience been? Have you seen a lot of changes? Do you think it's a more positive environment for women today than it was potentially 30 years ago?
I think it is. I think women have because women are now speaking up and not as frightened. My real mom was also an actress. She was under contract with I can't remember which studio. I think it was Universal. I mean, she and Marilyn Monroe were roommates, and she gave it all up when she became a mom. But she would tell stories of going into casting casting directors, and in those days it was mostly men, who basically would say, if you want the part, you have to provide some sort of sexual whatever. And she talked about this one director who actually he had a he had a button on his desk, so that when actresses would come in, he could push the button and lock, the door would automatically lock behind them. And she said there were a few times that, you know, she got caught, you know, pinned up against a wall. And yeah, she said it was pretty terrifying at times. And you just couldn't sort of talk about it. This is back in the 50s, you know, because it was, you know, always thought that, well, you went in there and you were wearing a short skirt, or you were wearing high heels, or you had red lipstick on, it was your fault, you know, you know, you really wanted the part, so, you know, no surprise that you'd be treated that way. And so they, you know, these women actresses would just clam up. I personally never, my weird thing was that when I was younger as an actress, there were several older men, actors who, you know, were trying to hit on me as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, you know, and that was my thing of, you know, not talking about it. And, you know, because some of these people were pretty famous actors and they're still around. And, you know, people say to me, I should write my memoir, but, you know, I was able to handle it. Let me put it that way. But I think, like, answering your question, I think now with more women producers, women directors, you know, the Reese Witherspoons, the Nicole Kidmans, who are putting out great, you know, material, and they're owning their own, you know, they have their own companies so that they, you know, can do exactly what they want to do, and make good quality films and all of that, and pretty much be their own, you know, what am I trying to say? They're
Boss.
you know, yeah, exactly. They can be in control of their own, sort of what I was talking about with my dad.
Yeah.
You know, having total say so.
Kind of, it's almost like the auteur theory, I think, is it's
Right.
sort of similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
as you progress through your career, yeah, I guess you've done. It's just not just films that you've been involved with either. As an actress, what areas have you also sort of dallianced in?
Well, I've written screenplays. I had one pilot that I wrote the treatment for, and then my dad and I wrote the pilot, and then it ended up being a Disney bought it and produced it and filmed it, and I have a screenplay right now that looks like it may be getting financed, and it's very women driven. It's 5 middle-aged women, you know, who are all single, trying to find love and revenge at the same time. So there's, you know, 5 50, 60-year-old women, and then there's 5 30-year-old women, and there's a couple of 20-year-old women. And I just like threw many, you know, a lot of estrogen in this movie. I'd like to get a woman director. You know, oh, I hear Stuart making popcorn. Sorry.
All right. Well, we're talking movies.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. Maybe it's for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've done that, and then I've written a few. I wrote a novel, and I'm working on my second novel right now. So yeah, I've been pretty busy, creatively wise.
And have you ever trod the boards yourself?
No, what do you mean?
The theatre. Have you ever played? Have you ever been on stage?
Oh yeah, I've done a few plays. I just actually did a play a couple of years ago that was very successful, and I love doing stage. It's a whole different, you know, ball game, but I really love doing it.
So again, looking at some of your roles, you ended up on a very popular science fiction show. Could you tell us a little bit about how that happened and that
Your
experience?
son is a very bright, very spirited young man. From his test scores, I'm sure he'll turn out to be one of my best students.
Well,
However-
yeah, I played the school teacher in on Star Trek: The Next Generation. I played Miss Kyle. Originally, I was supposed to actually take a trip. I bought a ticket to go to Costa Rica, and I got this audition, and I went in, and it was one of those auditions that I thought, well, I'm not gonna get this. So, yeah, I'm off to Costa Rica, but I got home, and it was one of those. As soon as I got home, my phone rang, and they were like, you got the part. So I had to cancel my trip to Costa Rica, and it was supposed to be a recurring role because one of the characters, Worf, has a son that comes onto the Enterprise and is supposed to live there and be schooled and whatever. But it ended up they didn't use the little boy anymore, and so they didn't need a teacher anymore. But it was great. It was a really fun. It was lovely to be on a show like that, and I sometimes go to these what are considered Comic-Con. I actually was at a Star Trek convention a few years ago, and I had a school teacher, a legitimate school teacher, come to my booth, and she said, your role and the way that you projected yourself as a teacher changed the way that I teach now. And I thought, oh, well, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've done something good in my life.
There you go.
Yeah, so
That was a good experience. All right. I guess we've talked a little about growing up and living in Hollywood. So where are you now in your career? You obviously, again, it's kind of as a woman growing up in Hollywood is a different experience to a man growing up in or being in Hollywood. What is that disparity and with being cast and also the jobs that are out there?
Well, I think it's coming around again. I think it's changing a bit, but for a while, I mean, I used to date this guy who's a manager, a producer, whatever, and he said to me when I was 30 or 30, like 32 years old, he said, because I was really frustrated. I wasn't really getting parts that I wanted, and he said, maybe you should change careers because women after 35, if they haven't made it in this business, may never work again. And it just stunned me because I never wanted to be a star. I never wanted to be famous per se. I just wanted to be a consistently working actor. I mean, I don't care what I look like on film. I'm not, I will take a pie in the face. I love physical comedy. All of that. So, but it really shook me because it's true. Men go on to, you'll have a 50, 60-year-old actor who, whose love interest is 30, and that happens all the time. And it's really unfortunate, I think, because supposedly the majority of people who go to the movies, to the movie theaters, are middle-aged women. So it just doesn't make much sense that you don't go, that demographic isn't being portrayed in a realistic way. And I think it's finally changing. I do feel that, like I said, there are these women who are now wanting to produce realistic relationships on screen.
Quite recently, obviously, the Sarah Jessica Parker and Sex and the City revamp.
Right. But there was backlash with that too, because some, you know, critics were saying that, you know, they just didn't believe or they didn't like the way that, you know, these 50-year-olds were portraying themselves. It's like, get over it. It's just, you know, that's who they are. They are in their 50s and or close to 60 or whatever. You know, give them a break. You know, yeah, Sarah Jessica has gray hair now. Okay, so, you know, she's still an incredible actress. And
I mean, it sounds like there's still, I don't know, it sounds like it's growing, but almost the skin is cracking to get away from the form that it's been stuck in for such a long period of time.
yeah, definitely.
I mean, that does sound like a positive thing for I don't know, aspiring young actresses, young film directors, particularly female, to be able to sort of hear this at the top end.
Yeah.
But that's also not to say that you know, it's for the young lads and for the boys as well, and for everybody, that there is opportunity there, and that it is evolving, particularly now, I guess, post-pandemic, with the way that the landscape changed a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very appropriate. Yeah. But I also think, because you brought it up, I think the Weinstein issue and learning more about how these mega millionaire bosses, you know, that you know, ruled Hollywood for a while, how incredibly vile they were, you know, in so many ways, and controlling, and you know, I think now that's been exposed has been really positive in a lot of ways, you know. The women that are standing up and saying we're not going to take it anymore. And you know, I think it's also just, you know, the times have just sort of changed on all levels. I mean, even for African American actors and everything, you know, everybody's sort of coming into we're all sort of seeing this new sort of generation of actors and directors who are wanting to really represent who we are as
diversity.
You know. Yeah, exactly. So I think we're on the right trajectory in that sense. So and you know, and I'm hoping that I can be a part of that as well. I mean, the script that I mentioned, you know, I wrote a part for myself, and that's in the contract, that if we do get financing, that I'm playing that part. There was talk of me possibly directing, and I said no. I mean, I don't really want to direct something that I'm in, per se.
Okay.
Maybe
why tell us a little bit about that?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I think it would take me, if it's the first time I'm directing something, I don't want to be concentrating on two things at once.
Two separate skill sets.
Exactly. I want to be able to, and also being the writer as well. If I want to change something, you know, let's rewrite, let's do, you know, a different scene here or whatever, then that's my sort of contribution in terms of, you know, directing that side of things, but not behind the camera. I mean, if I do that at some point, it would be something that I'm not also performing in. You know, a lot of people have asked me if I would want to direct, and I always said no. But I've been looking at that more and more as a possibility at some point.
Tell us a little bit about the responsibility of directing. Is it? I mean, you know, often I talk to the students. I want to be a director, or I want to be a producer, and then I sort of break down the differences between the two, which are quite big. But you know, director is one of those things. You see the Hollywood stars, and then you've got the specific directors that have got large names for themselves. But what do you do as a director, or what would you assume that you would be doing?
Well, you have to also be sort of an acting coach, if you will. I mean, you have to know camera angles. You have to know. I mean, I remember when I did a film called SOB. My dad directed it, but William Holden, who was very, very famous actor, um, um, he was also in it. And I remember him saying to the director of photography, okay, what lens do you have on the camera right now? And the DP told him, and he said, oh, okay. And I said, why did you ask about that? And he said, well, because I know that if the camera doesn't move, I can only walk to about here and then I'll be out of frame. And I thought, whoa, that's an actor who knows that kind of stuff. And I so admired the fact that he knew all that.
What was on screen.
Exactly. And how it would look and all of that. But, you know, a director has to not only figure out also the camera angles, and okay, I want, you know, a close up here, and I want, you know, a full shot here, I want whatever. You know, the lighting doesn't seem right, or, I mean, you have to know all of that as a director. Plus, you have to also be directing your cast. My dad famously had an actor, I won't mention who, but he was a very famous actor who is brilliant, and they did several films together. But the actor would like throw everything out there. And what my dad was really good at was saying, okay, let's just try and just reel that in. How about saying it this way instead of that? And finally, after like the 5th or 6th take, this particular actor would get exactly the right performance, and it wasn't, you know, overly, you know, because film is very different than stage, obviously. On stage, you can, you know, be flamboyant or more, you know, loud, and because you sort of have to be. You're this big, you know, on a stage. But on film, you know, it has sometimes it has to be, you know,
less is more.
Travel. Exactly. So there's all of that comes into play as a director, you know.
Right. It has been an absolute joy to talk to you, and to talk about you a little bit about your past and your family, and where you are now. And it's really, you know, taking that angle as well to, you know, looking at women in media is a really important one at this time. And I think, you know, having yourself to talk directly to our students is amazing. There's a couple of bits I put on the end of my notes, which was to say, would there be any sort of nuggets of advice you would give to young people nowadays that have been essentially locked down for a couple of years? It's been tricky, but you know, what are their opportunities? What are their chances in the industry?
Well, I think first and foremost, the studying is, I think, very important. I mean, if some of the students want to be actors, then I think they need to be in class. They need to really learn what it is to. I'll give one piece of advice that my father said to me when I got the role of Heidi. He said, and it always made the most sense as an actor to me, is there's no such thing as acting. It's all reacting. So even if you have nothing to say, even if you have no lines, you have to react. You have to react to a noise. You have to react to whatever, a smell, and also to listen. And also you don't necessarily may not have any lines to say, but it's really important to listen to the other actor, because if there's a different inflection in their delivery or whatever, you have to now react to the way they've said it. So those two things, there's no such thing as acting, it's all reacting, and to listen make the most sense to me, no matter how many classes I've taken. However, being in class is really important, I think, especially as you're starting out, because it is a muscle. It's like, you know, if you're a musician, you have to practice every day. You know, you've got, and if anybody is wanting to be a director or whatever, look at the classic movies. Look at, know what you're talking about. I'm amazed at, very quickly, there was an audition that my manager tried to get me in on for this show, for a middle-aged woman who was a novelist, romance novelist, and I just published a romance novel, who had a good sense of humor, somewhat acerbic. Anyway, she called and she said, so my client, Jennifer Edwards, you know, she has written a book and whatever, and she's perfect for this part. And she has her father, Blake Edwards, is Funny Bone. And the casting director said, I've never heard of them. And so my manager said, well, you know, Blake Edwards, the Pink Panthers. And he said, no. She said, Victor Victoria? He said, no. She said, Breakfast at Tiffany's. He said, no. He said, look, I've been in the business for 10 years, and if I don't know who somebody is, they don't mean anything to me. Now, as a casting person, you would think that, you know, especially if you've been in the business for 10 years, yeah. You know, that you would know your art, you know, so I think it's important that students look at the classics, look at Frank Capra, how Frank Capra directed back in the day. Know what you're talking about as a you know, as a filmmaker.
So you've studied others before you go out there and say, look, I'm blazing a new trail, I'm doing this, has never been done before. Actually, mate, it may well have been done before, and it may well have been done very, very well by a person that's learned from previous incarnations of the movies themselves. Like you said, going right back to your granddad. His granddad?
Yeah, my great-grandfather was, yeah, he directed silent films, yeah.
You know, and from the silent films, people that worked in the talkies learned from the people in the silent film. And if you look at some of Charlie Chaplin's special effects and the crazy stuff they did to cheat angles and make it look like he was falling through buildings,
wall, or yeah, oh yeah.
But it's geometry, it's maths, you know, and it's stunning, and I think it's why I love it, and it's why it's amazing to talk to you firsthand, Jennifer Edwards, and I think at this point I'll let you go and start your day, because as my day's ending, your day's is beginning.
Yeah, sleep well.
Yes, I will. Thank you so much for your time on behalf of myself and Nottingham College. It's lovely to see you again, and I hope that we'll see you again soon.
I hope so too.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.